Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the third episode of this Java tutorial series. In this episode, we will be talking about some of the Boolean comparison operators as well as some string manipulation, which you can do, more specifically in concatenation and the dot equals to operator. Lastly, we will also be touching upon the keyword final. So it'll just be relatively another basic lesson just to get you in the flow of things and just make sure you understand the main types of data or primitive data types and objects you'll be working with. By that I mean integers, doubles, chars, booleans, and the object class of string. So in this episode, we're going to touch upon booleans and strings. So first, let's get started. So as you can see here on the screen, we have our basic class outline. We have the class, we have a main method, we have hello world printed here, and we also have two variables of type int, which store the numbers 5 and 6. So how would we go about comparing these two numbers? Variables. Now, as you may recall from your days in elementary school, you can compare two numbers with greater than sign or less than sign. The same principle applies to Java and other programming languages as well. You can compare the numbers using a greater than sign, a less than sign, a greater than or equal to sign, or less than or equal to sign. So what do these signs look like in Java? Let me go ahead and type them out for you. So the first sign is greater than. And as you might imagine, it's just this. The second sign is less than, which as you might imagine is this. The third sign is greater than or equal to, which is just this. The fourth sign is less than or equal to, which is just this. Now, there are two more signs which we will be using, and I will cover those in a moment. But first, let's go ahead and use these signs and put them to the test. So let's say I want to know if num1 is greater than num2. Now, obviously, there are only two answers to this. It's either num1 is greater than num2, which means true, or num1 is less than num2, which is kind of false in this case, because we're checking to see if it's greater, and it's not, so it'd be false. Now, what type of data type do we use to store true and false values? We use a Boolean. So let's go ahead and create a Boolean variable called Boolean Checker, and we're going to set that equal to num1 is greater than num2. Basically, let me break this down for you. All this variable is doing is storing the results of this comparison. So num1 5 is it greater than 6? It's not. So this comparison will turn out to be false, and the value false will be stored in this variable. Let's go ahead and test this by printing out checker. So I'm going to run the code. And as you can see here, I'm going to comment out hello world next, but it does indeed print false. What would happen if I did this? Is num1 less than num2? Well, I should expect true. And what does our program tell us? Our program tells us true as well. So let's do another example. Now that we've tested greater than and less than, let's go ahead and do an example of a bank account. Let's say balance equal to $5,000. Let's say, I don't know, let's say you want this new car, and the cost of the car is $7,800. So, given this, I want you to pause for a second, and I want you to see if you have enough money to buy the car. And the way I want you to do it is to basically write a Boolean variable called checker and then use a comparison, and then print that out. So go ahead and pause the video. And hopefully now that you've come back, you've been able to do this. So we're basically trying to see if this balance is enough to buy the car. So let's go ahead and try that out. So is balance greater than car? And we're going to probably go ahead and print out checker. But before I do so, there might be a slight error, a logic error in line 20. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can figure out for yourself. But now I'll go ahead and tell you. This statement wouldn't work if balance is the exact amount you need for the car. That's because in order to buy the car, you need at least $7,800. But to suppose today I change the money in our balance amount, our variable, to 7,800. Then you do have enough money to buy the car. You just won't have any money left to spare. But this comparison will test out to be false when it indeed should be true. So what you should do is that you should say greater than or equal to using this operator. So I'm going to go ahead and put the equal to sign, and I'm going to revert this back to 5,000. You always want to make sure whenever you're programming, you try and test for all the cases which are practically possible. So we're going to go ahead and run it. And it prints out false. So we need more money. Now, luckily, I have a paycheck coming in. Int paycheck equals $3,000. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to create, I'm going to create a new variable called int updated balance. And I want you to see if the updated balance, which should be equal to balance plus paycheck, is greater than the car, and store that in the variable checker and then print it out. So go ahead and take a moment to pause the video and try that. Okay, so now that you're back, let's go ahead and do this. So int updated balance, we're going to set that equal to balance plus paycheck. Now we're going to see if updated balance is greater than or equal to car. And it should print out as true. Now, no, you can totally skip this step of like variable declaration. You can get rid of this. You can just copy paste this line, get rid of this here, and put it here like so, and run the code, and you'll still get the same result as true. Perfect. So now let's go ahead and talk about the other two comparison signs. Obviously, you have equals to, which is just two equal signs, and you have not equals to, which is a bang or exclamation mark and an equal sign. Let's go ahead and use these two. And I'd assume you know how to use this based on example of these three. So let's go ahead and use the equal to sign. Let's say I have two numbers again. I want to see if they're equal or not. And I want to store that value in this Boolean variable called checker and then print it. So what I do, I would simply just do this. I'm testing to see if num1 is equal to num2. Now this line may seem a bit confusing because it's like you have this equal sign here and you have another equal sign here. But let me go ahead and break this line down for you. So we have num1, which is 5, and we have num2, which is 4. All this piloted portion of code is checking is to see if these two variables have the same value as each other. It is not assigning the variables to each other, but it's just checking to see if they have the same value. Once it's done checking to see it has the same value, it will obtain a status of true or false. So once this is done checking to see what it is, and if it's true or false, that true or false will be assigned to the variable checker using this equal sign. So a singular equal sign in Java is used to assign variables values, whereas a double equal sign in Java is used to compare if the two values of different variables are the same. So hopefully that clarifies things up. And if you want to see if they're not the same, just replace the first equal sign with an exclamation mark or a bang, as they call it in programming. So that should be the main comparison signs that you have to know of in Java. Make sure you memorize them and understand when to use them. Okay, perfect. So now we're going to be talking about strings. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of this. Let's say string name1 equals Bob. String name2 equals Joey. So how would I compare to see if two strings are the same? So we just did comparisons for these, and we already know that there's an equals to sign. So maybe we're thinking, let's go ahead and use this. However, I strongly discourage you from using the equals to sign when comparing two strings. And this is because when you do that, you're actually not really comparing the values of the string. You're just kind of comparing the memory of it, where it's in the computer. It's a bit confusing, but essentially, the string class has its own method, has its own function or like method, that they call it, that you can use on a string object to compare the values of different strings. So let me go ahead and show that to you. So let's say I want to see if this string name1 is the same as name2, and I'm going to store that comparison in the variable called checker. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this, and then I'm going to say name1 dot equals, and inside parentheses name2. So let me go ahead and break this down. Name1 is the first string, which is Bob, and dot equals is the method that we use to compare two strings, and it takes in an argument of the other string which you're comparing it to. Now, obviously, you can say a variable, or you can quite literally like put a string inside and it'll compare it. But we're going to go ahead and use a variable. All it's checking to see if the contents of the string are the same, and this should run false. And it runs false as shown above. So we know how to compare two strings now. Now let's go ahead and talk about string concatenation. So what exactly is string concatenation? Well, let's think about it from an English perspective. And let's say you have two sentences, two fully independent clauses. If you guys know what that means, they're basically sentences. And you want to combine them together. Now, your English teacher might have taught you to use fanboys for, and, nor, but, yet. So you get the idea. They may have taught you to use some sort of fanboy or something like that when combining the two together. Now, that's exactly what the string concatenation is. You use a plus sign, which serves as a fanboy to connect the two strings together. So hopefully that analogy makes sense. But let's go ahead and try that out. So let's say I'm going to make a new string connect, and it's going to be equal to the first string plus the second string. Now, what this does is that it literally just combines the two strings together. It places this string after the end of this string, and it stores it into this variable called connect. Now, let's go ahead and print connect here. As you can see, you'll print out Bob, Joey. Now, you can also do string concatenation by simply doing the variable name plus a string and not another variable name. Let me show you in the print statement. So for example, you can say connect, and then you can add a space, and you can do a plus sign, and then you can say name1, and you can do another plus sign and say hi. It's going to be a weird fragment, but this should work by string concatenation. See, connect Bob, hi. Now, one thing to note is that you have to add spaces because Java doesn't understand English. So whenever you're concatenating strings, it's always important if you're kind of like putting in the middle of a sentence to add spaces around like the strings here, or to add a space at the end of like this. Let's go ahead and run it. Okay, so that is string concatenation. Now, the last concept that we covered in the lesson was the keyword final. Basically, all final does is that when you initialize the variable and you set it to a value, and you put the keyword final in front of the variable, the value cannot be changed whatsoever. Let's go ahead and do that. Say final int number equals 5. Now, to test to see if final works, let's go ahead and try and assign 5 to another. Let's go ahead and try and assign the variable number to another number. We're going to say number equals 6. We're going to run this code, and there should be an error. Error cannot assign a value to final variable number. Now, that is exactly what we were looking for. If you assign a variable to like a final variable, then you basically can't change the value. Now, why would you want to ever use this? Suppose you kind of want to use this for fixed values or constants. For example, the value of a quarter, 25 cents, that's constant. You'd use a final type variable. Value of $1 is constant. Anytime in science when you're dealing with like stuff like Avogadro's number or like any constants in science, like gravity, little g, 9.81 meters per second squared, you'd probably use a constant because those values never change no matter what. Now, this was just today's lesson. It was a bit small, but going into next lesson, we're going to be talking about how to combine all the stuff we've learned so far. More specifically, we're going to be going into classes and object-oriented programming. And we're also going to do a little bit of math review in the next lesson as well. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for following along with this series. And please subscribe to the channel. And refer to the other 2 episodes as well if you're just trying to get started with Java. And hope this helps you a lot. Thank you once again.